Hello, everybody. This is Jane Day coming to you from my living room. And today I'm going to present a little PowerPoint presentation called Dreaming of Gondolas, Italian Memories in Palm Beach Architecture. You might think that it's odd that I'm talking about Italian influences on Palm Beach architecture because mostly we think of Palm Beach as being very Spanish and red-roofed architecture, particularly from the 1920s. But I believe that all of the people who were coming to Palm Beach during this time period were doing so because they couldn't go to the Mediterranean for their usual vacations. A 1919 newspaper article from this period reads, "Building goes forward in Palm Beach despite the war." That would be the First World War. The article went on to say, "The war brought people of great wealth to Palm Beach who had never been there before. The common comment among them was, 'I did not know America had a place of so wonderful a climate. It surpasses the Mediterranean Riviera.'" But as they were coming to Florida, they were still thinking of those vacations and all of that travel that they did before this transition happened. Palm Beach is one of the great seaside resorts in Florida. The first settlers arrived in 1876 and the post office was established in 1887. The town was incorporated in 1911. Its history is punctuated with rich and powerful people, talented architects, and spectacular buildings. This paper proposes that the architecture of Palm Beach that we all love and admire is a fantasy, an artifice. It imagines both the history and architecture of other places, but it does not represent the original models with any accuracy. Instead, the vision is informed by the imagination of tourists and travelers. Details were chosen from a variety of sources, while the architects reassembled the pieces and developed a new resort architecture that emerged as what Dean McConnell, writing in The Tourist, a new theory of the leisure class, called staged authenticity. Today, we'll look at some of the Italian inspirations while we dream of the reality of Venice and its wonderful gondolas. So what did these Northerners find when they came to Palm Beach to build their villas and their resort architecture? They found things like Alligator Joe, an early tourist attraction, which was low swampland. This particular site is where the Everglades Club is today on the western end of Worth Avenue. They also found a type of architecture that was known as Jersey Shore architecture. This is Segal Cottage. Built in 1886, it's the oldest house still standing in Palm Beach. It was originally built by a Denver businessman named Robert McCormick. Henry Flagler bought it and started resort building. He changed how people got to Florida. He brought the train, which is now where the train tracks are now where the North Bridge is. And he was a founding partner with J.D. Rockefeller in Standard Oil. Addison Cairns Meisner, 1882 to 1933, arrived in 1918 with his friend Paris Singer. Singer was the son of the Singer sewing machine developer, so that he was the person that had the money. Meisner is the person that had the design talent. Meisner romantically wrote about his design for the Everglades Club in 1923. The club itself was opened in 1919 with 25 charter members, but Meisner said about it, quote, "It ought to be something religious, a nunnery with a chapel built into a lake, with a great cool cloister and a court of oranges, a landing stage where the stern old abbess could barter with boatmen, bringing their fruits and vegetables for sale. A great gate over there on the road where the faithful could leave their offerings and receive largesse. This building is still standing. It has been renovated and used and loved by its members since that opening in 1919. Alva Johnson, in the legendary Meisners, published in 1953, described Meisner's work as bastard Spanish, Moorish, Romanesque, Gothic, Renaissance, bull market, damn the expense style. But if you walk further down Worth Avenue toward the west, and you look over a garden gate, you'll see over the front door the famous Venice Lion. This was Meisner's first Venetian inspiration. Gary Wills, in his book Venice Lion City, The Religion of Empire, says that this representation is a certification of authority. And indeed, when you travel in the Venice and the Veneto today, you will see this sculpture, same sculpture of a lion all over the region. He stands with one paw raised over an open Bible, relating a passage where the angel speaks to San Marco, the patron of the city. The lion's other 3 feet, however, are firmly planted on the ground. But this is a winged lion, and will suggest that lifted wings are the spread sails of the boats over the Venetian Empire's lagoon. Launched from the lagoon itself, the empire spread all over the western Mediterranean. The Venetians are people of the water. They were amphibians at home in the water from birth. And you have to be at home in the water if you live in this house. The house was built in 1921 for Leonard Thomas, who served as the secretary at the United States Embassy in Rome. Thomas's father was a successful partner in the Philadelphia brokerage firm of Drexel and Company. Thomas filled the house with imported Italian furniture, insisted on a covered gondola slip, and even hired an Italian cook who would help complete the fantasy of being in Venice. You can see that gondola slip there. It looks like a garage on the water. But even with the stage set, these houses were still lived in by Americans. In 1924, the house was sold to the Robert Glendenning family. If you go to the Meisner Fountain in Palm Beach today in front of Town Hall, you will see Glendenning's name as one of the original contributors to the funds to build that fountain. These 2 are 2 of his grandchildren, Perky Fraser and his sister Bettina. But while they're living in an Italian house on Lake Worth, and Perky, in fact, is dressed in a striped shirt similar to that the gondolieres would wear in Venice, they're still American kids. Bettina is doing her nails, and on the end table next to Perky is a Coca-Cola bottle. This is what the house looks like today, and this is how it looks east across the lake to the Everglades Club. So you have 2 of Meisner's original projects making contact with each other, one Spanish, one Italian, but both anchored in the lagoon. Marion Sims Wyeth, 1889 to 1982, was one of the most important architects in early Palm Beach. When he opened his office in 1919, there were only 2 other architects in town: August Geiger, who also had an office in Miami, and Addison Meisner. Wyeth was born in New York City and graduated from Princeton and the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. He was classically trained. His aunt had a villa in Italy where he often stayed while studying in Europe. And after graduation, he became the private secretary to the American ambassador in Rome. His first commission in the area was Good Samaritan Hospital in West Palm Beach, the first hospital in the county. Later, he would design such important buildings as the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee, the Norton Art Museum, the Norton's house that is now the Ann Norton Sculpture Garden, and Doris Duke's house, Shangri-La, in Honolulu, Hawaii. During his 54-year career, he completed 735 projects. His most Venetian project was an early one, 1924 to 25, called Vitas Arena. It was a $50,000 project, which was a lot of money in 1924, and was described in the local paper as a Venetian Gothic palace. I can just hear John Ruskin, the famous critic from the 19th century, turning over in his grave when I say that, because the reality is that this house is so horizontal in its layout and design that it really does not resemble the much taller palazzos along the Grand Canal in Venice. It does, however, have the Gothic arches and many of the details of those Italian palaces, but it's very Americanized and it's set for its position in Lake Worth. There is, however, a gondola slip that's way to the left in this photograph, where you could pull in your gondola before taking it out for a spin or a row on Lake Worth. The house was built for Frederick Glidden of the Glendenning Paint and Varnish Company. We know, however, that Wyeth knew better about Venetian architecture. He knew better than to just do fantasy, but I guess he was inspired by the client to produce this work, because he did visit Venice in the 1920s. Another client sent him to the Brenta Canal to find inspiration for a project that has since been demolished. In 1926, Glendenning died suddenly, a year after the house was built, but not before learning the trials of acqua alta, the very Venetian phenomena of rising water and how it can seep into your living room. This house was so low and close to the water line when it was built in 1925 that it flooded at high tide and a full moon almost immediately. During the 1990s, the house was lifted so that that would no longer be a problem. This was done during a very important renovation, which added an addition to the property, but also raised it above the water line to protect the furnishings and the interior design. As you can see, the road in front of the house was also raised, and you can tell that at least a little bit by the driveway that comes up from the mean level of the road. Mar-a-Lago, 1927, is probably the most famous house in America, and it was built in 1927, and many people don't associate it with Marion Sims Wyeth, but instead associate it with Joseph Urban, who was brought on afterwards to complete the exterior design, but also more importantly to do the interiors. In fact, later in life, when Wyeth wrote about this house, he wrote, "It isn't my taste, it's the taste of Joe Urban. I didn't want anyone to think I was the architect in charge." But delving further into the design of Mar-a-Lago, the great architectural historian Don Curl, who wrote about Addison Meisner, said, in fact, the interior layout of the house, where the rooms fan out from a central cloister, was Wyeth's idea, and the basis of the house, the bones of the building, are Wyeth's. The design of the interior, however, is more related to Joseph Urban and, of course, to Marjorie Meriwether Post, who with her husband E.F. Hutton was the builder of the house. This is the living room at Mar-a-Lago, and you can tell immediately the inspirations that come from Italy. The coats of arms around the top of the walls at the ceiling juncture are the coats of arms of the Doges of Venice. They are not ecclesiastical at all. The tapestries that surround the room were purchased in a Venetian palazzo. They're silk tapestries, and then they were cut to surround the room and put a beautiful plaster molding around it. The ceiling, this is a close-up of the ceiling of that room, is a copy of the 1,000-wing ceiling from the Accademia in Venice. The original bas-relief of this ceiling had angel faces, cherub faces in the center, but Mrs. Post removed those and substituted a sunburst design. She wanted to avoid all references to religious iconography or to the church when she did this. The dining room in Mar-a-Lago also has its connection to Italian works of art. The paintings in this room are copied from the Chigi Palace in Rome. There was also originally a 4,000-pound marble table in this space, inlaid with motifs from antique tables from the Pitti Palace and the Uffizi galleries in Florence. The table was made in Italy. Hutton writing to E.F. Wyeth talked about the expense, but Marjorie got what Marjorie wanted. And here is Mrs. Post with her friend Billy Burke, and on the other side is E.F. Hutton with two of their guests. These two pictures remind me that much like Carnival in Venice, the early Palm Beach visitors loved their costume parties. And these are pictures from that era. The house itself had taken 4 years and 600 laborers to build. The budget had gone from $1 million to $2,500,000. An army of stone cutters from Austria pitched tents and lived at the site until the Gothic-like gargoyles were finished. It has 115 rooms, 800 windows and doors, 42 bedrooms, and 31 baths. E.F. Hutton is reported to have remarked, "I wanted a seaside cottage and look what I got." The marriage did not last. Maurice Fazio was born in Geneva, Switzerland in 1887. He passed away in 1943. His family, although Swiss, traced their lineage back to northern Italy and to the time period of 1411. Fazio graduated from the Zurich Polytechnical and came to New York in 1920. He started his Palm Beach practice in 1924. He died in 1943 of cancer after just a short 19-year career, but he left wonderful masterpieces in the town. This is one of his most famous houses called Casa Aleta. It was built in 1928 for Mortimer and Adele Schiff. Schiff was a member of the prestigious investment firm Kahn, Loeb and Company, which was started by his grandfather. The house was built in the Italian Romanesque style, and the name of the house, Aleta, was just Mr. Schiff's wife's name, Adele, reversed. It's also sometimes been called the Ham Sandwich House because of the alternating bands of red brick and quarry stone that dominate the design. The house is across the street from the beach, but there was originally a 165-foot tunnel under A1A for the owners to get to the beach. It has 8 bedrooms built around a courtyard. Another great Italian influence building by Maurice Fazio is Casa della Porta Paradiso, built in 1928. This house was designed for William McEnany, the owner of the Hudson Motor Car Company, for the unbelievable budget of $2 million. This allowed the architect to hire 3 stone masons from Italy to complete the surround around the front door. It took 6 months to complete that door and was patterned on a Tuscan monastery. Here's a close-up of the door. It juxtaposed classical and biblical scenes. Inside is an 85-foot cloistered courtyard, also inspired by Italian monasteries. There are 17 bedrooms, 18 baths, a 30 by 50-foot dining room, and so many patios that on one occasion a maid was rumored to have gotten lost in the house. Parties, it was said, could accommodate 750 guests. One house that Fazio did is very much based, instead of on the Romanesque Italian style, on a style that's much more high Italian Renaissance. This is Villa Oheka. It was built in 1929 for Otto and Addie Kahn. Kahn was born in Mannheim, Germany. He worked for Deutsche Bank. Mrs. Kahn was the daughter of another one of the partners of Kahn, Loeb and Company. As you can see, people came here, followed their friends, and a lot of the people that came from up north knew each other in other settings in the northern part of the country. Kahn was an opera lover and became a major stockholder in the Metropolitan Opera in 1903. The name Oheka is a play on his own name, O for Otto, He for Herman, and Ka for Kahn. The exterior of the house was a perfect example of the Italian Renaissance style, but the interior was done in the modern style. After Kahn's death, the estate was bought by the Graham Ecke School. In 1968, it was returned to a private residence. Here's a personal photograph taken by Ellen Glendenning, the daughter of the owner who I showed you earlier that owned Casa della Leone. And it's a great photograph because not only is the owner of the house, Otto Kahn, in the photograph, but also the architect is over on the right-hand side, Maurice Fazio, a wonderful picture from the 1920s. And so while I am isolated during this very trying time, I'm still looking at Palm Beach architecture, thinking of all of you, but while I'm doing that, I'm still dreaming of gondolas, and I hope you are too and staying well. Thank you and good night.